And as always, here on India Today, we get you the best, sharpest voices from Ukraine, in which several cities are under siege. It's day 10 of the military operations. I'm joined now by Dr. Hanna Shelest. She's editor-in-chief at Ukraine Analytica. She's a security affairs analyst and a journalist. Hanna, good to see you again. Thank you for being with India Today. An important day, Hanna, today. It's day 10 of the military operations. Just a couple of hours ago, the Russian Ministry of Defense announced a ceasefire, a limited ceasefire in the cities of Mariupol and Volnovakha in the eastern parts. Your assessment, what do you think of that? A limited ceasefire in just those two cities to allow civilians to get out?
Yes, there were very heavy fighting and blockade of these two towns for the last several days. So the humanitarian catastrophe could start because people been limiting in food and basic supply. So that's why it's been arranged. But let's see how it would be implemented, because it should start at 11. So in 1 hour from now, by Ukrainian time, the corridor for evacuation of civilians. Unfortunately, we're very cautious about these, as we already had, for example, in 2014, the case when Russians announced humanitarian corridor and then started shelling our armed forces. The same during the negotiations between Russians and Ukrainians happening within the last few days. The ceasefire was not observed. Everybody continued to fight. So that's why we really pray and hope that civilians will be able to leave the town. But at the same time, only when the operation is over, we will be able to evaluate and to speak about it.
Okay, so you're saying that you're being cautious. You'd like to actually see the ceasefire in action, Hanna, before before you judge the efficacy of that ceasefire, because in the past you've been betrayed. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. Unfortunately, we had these examples already.
Okay, I want to ask you about the other cities. When Russia announces a ceasefire only for Mariupol and and Volnovakha, which you said has seen a blockade over the last few days. What about the other places, Hanna? What about the other places? What about the other cities which have either fallen or are besieged, or where the violence is even greater?
First of all, those cities where the violence is greater, none of them besieged. So neither Kharkiv nor Chernihiv are occupied currently by the Russian forces. So they are controlled by the Ukrainian forces. And the only problem is definitely evacuation, because they are under heavy shelling of the missiles. So it's not the forces, physical forces, that you can say to stop, for example, and to make a green corridor. That is missiles, and Russians are not going to allow people for evacuation. But people are managing to evacuate by their own cars in some of the moments. Chernihiv is very difficult moment. I have my 4 staff members living there and currently being all these 10 days in the shelters in the basement. And that is impossible to evacuate from there, because from Chernihiv, the only road that is to Kiev, and Kiev is also under attack. So that is just physically, Russians would not allow something like this. Yet one town that been captured, it is Kherson. It is a small town which is just above Crimea. So this town being occupied by the forces from Crimea. I talked yesterday with my friends from there. Ukrainian mobile operators stopped operating there. It was a little bit of Wi-Fi from time to time that you could catch. And what Russians did, they brought a lot of people, civilians from Crimea, to stage the videos, to show in as locals are supporting them. But all of the locals are trying now to hide in their houses, to hide in some villages nearby, not to support the actions. And even with the Russian tanks on the main square, a few brave Ukrainians came with the flags in Kherson to demonstrate that Kherson is not going to betray and to surrender.
I also want to ask you about what happened over the last 36 hours, Hanna, in the Zaporizhia area, the nuclear facility, Europe's largest. Yesterday, it appeared that the Russians had taken control of it. Today, the Ukrainian government has said, we've taken back control of it. The Russians have said, we never even fired at it. You know, there's a big war of claims going on between both sides. What is your, realistic perspective of what's happening there?
In the town of Energodar, where Zaporizhzhia facility is stationed, people been opposing very much. You probably show to your viewers the pictures and plenty of civilians close the roads. So what we heard from the civilians there, that some of the Russian officers came to them and said, we don't want to fight, please allow us to come to the facility, make photos, so we should demonstrate that we occupied it, but we are not going to do it. Unfortunately, at the same time, in the same night, in few hours, you had these devastating photos of shelling. This shelling was happening not from Ukrainian territory, because there is no that type of armed forces nearby. So that and direction and everything, you can easily evaluate it. And International Atomic Organization already spoke about it. That been shelling exactly from Mariupol area and from Crimea, because Zaporizhzhia is the next region to Mariupol. And the fire happened. Ukrainian firefighters been allowed only after a few hours over there. They calmed down the fire, but still the situation is very unstable, because you imagine that nuclear facilities are very sensitive places. It's not only fire that is dangerous, but even the huge amount of heavy armament there, it is very dangerous, because it is like a small earthquake for this territory. And as for now, we know that Russians were not able to occupy the whole facility. So the fightings are happening at the outskirts, and the situation can be changing even when we are speaking with you.
Hanna, we're going to get some breaking images in just a moment, but I want to ask you one question about NATO. You know, NATO and the West have said that they can't, give Ukraine what it's asking for, which is an air defense umbrella right now, because that would mean getting into the war more directly, and it could actually escalate things with Russia. Is there a sense, we've been speaking to members of parliament in Ukraine all of today. They say there is a sense of betrayal in Ukraine right now over the manner in which the West and NATO are refusing to get into this more directly. Is that true? Is there a sense of betrayal?
It is a sense of betrayal among some parts of population, but we need to be honest and with a more sober mind. First of all, a lot of NATO member states, individual countries, are supporting Ukraine tremendously. Like Estonia, the country of 1 million people, already delivered the goods for $200 million. So you can imagine how tremendously they are assisting. Not speaking about US, UK, many other countries, Poland. So that is a support from the NATO member states. The question is only with a no-fly zone. That is very difficult. On the one hand, that's what Ukraine really needs, so to stop all these shellings. At the same time, try to imagine the size of Ukrainian territory. And I understand that it will be extremely difficult to fulfill it, to implement it technically. From west to south of Ukraine, it is approximately 1,500 kilometers. And all NATO member states are at our western borders. The heavy fighting is on the east. So to protect Kharkiv, how you can do it? It means that NATO airplanes need to fly the whole territory of Ukraine to be under the threat, and definitely it is still a question that it can be that efficient as we would like to have it. But we know that these talks are not closed, that in many NATO countries they are still discussing technical possibilities of what can be done to protect Ukrainian sky, and that's what we really need.
Stay with me, Hanna, for just a moment. I want to get your reaction in on the latest images. I don't know if you're able to see them, but I'll describe them for you. The Russian Defense Ministry has just put out footage, Hanna, of the advancement of Russian units in the Kyiv region. Viewers who've been watching this story play out all this while have been watching satellite pictures of that huge military convoy that has been headed towards Kyiv. And now state Russian media has published images, the first images of what they say is that huge military convoy advancing towards Kyiv and maybe nearing Kyiv. We can see some armored personnel carriers. We can see some other armored vehicles as well, tanks as well, in these images that have been put out officially by the Russian government. Close-up images of Russian troops and tanks, part of that military convoy on day 10. Hanna, what do you make of this? Because, many members of parliament we've been speaking to have said that the convoy was actually stopped some distance away by Ukrainian ground forces. It hasn't been able to advance. This video being put out by the Russians to suggest that it's on the move and approaching Kyiv.
It's already where these first satellite photos being made. You already can say that they've been approaching Kiev. So it's just depending how you define their location. The real situation that they definitely stopped for some time, and they've been several versions why it happened. Somebody said that it is just to distract attention of the Ukrainian armed forces to concentrate on that direction and to open another road. The second version is that Russians are trying to regroup because now they have quite a dispersed forces around Kiev, and they are trying to regroup to accumulate the forces that they need for the big strike. But the third version is also that they are limiting in supply, first of all, of fuel, because you understand that all of these cars, and that is the case already in many towns around the border, that they came, but they couldn't advance because Ukrainians managed to stop their logistics. So Bayraktar, for example, bombed the fuel cars, and without fuel they are not able to find any fuel on the ground because there is no support of the locals. And to bring it from Belarus, it means you need to pass again all those towns like Chernigiv where the heavy fightings are happening.
Okay, so, obviously a lot of video footage that has been coming out over the last few days to kind of project what is happening on the ground. So the approach to Kyiv is happening. Very interesting point that Hanna reveals to us, that there are lots of theories over why this convoy actually stopped there for a few days. But the point is that the Russians are definitely better armed. They've got vastly more resources than Ukraine, Hanna. So has it come to a point where without outside help, Ukraine will not be able to defend Kyiv? Is that a reality?
No, because their arms without people means nothing. And to fight, you need a moral integrity, you need the determination, and you need the support on the ground. Because you can have a very heavy tank, but if this tank is without fuel and your soldier is hungry, this soldier means usually nothing. So what we have now, that we have more and more cases of the Russian soldiers surrender by themselves just because they don't want to fight, because they don't want to implement the orders they are receiving to shell against civilians, for example, or they just don't have sufficient resources and they understand that that is suicide, but not the real fight. So from Ukrainian side, at the same time, you have a very strong support of the locals. If you have a block post with the military somewhere, it means the whole village is cooking and supporting them. When you're on your land and you have this support of people, it means much more. Plus, Ukraine has certain facilities, certain weapons that Russians don't and don't have the analogs, like Turkish Bayraktars. These drones, these military drones, are extremely efficient in such wars because they are coming and just throwing the bombs from the air, and all these convoys already experience quite a serious problems. That's something Russians cannot prevent from what they have on the ground at the territory of Ukraine.
Okay,
so military skills plus motivation sometimes means much more than the cruise missile.
Okay, very interesting point being made there by Hanna Shelest. We're going to look at everything very, very closely because it looks like things might be reaching a decisive phase right now. Ukrainians are fighting bravely. Citizens are standing strong. We're going to be reporting from Kyiv in just a short while from now. Hanna, appreciate it. Thank you very much. Stay safe. We'll keep coming back to you. These images have just been put out by the Russian government, Russian Ministry of Defense. Pictures of that big military convoy, which they say is closing in on Kyiv. On the right-hand side, you can see satellite pictures, very, very high-resolution satellite pictures, only with India today, of that very same convoy. And now we've got those pictures from the ground as well. First, officially released pictures of that military convoy. Many swirling theories over why it has taken so long to close in on Kyiv. Fierce battling. Lots of defensive measures by the Ukrainian ground forces as well. But remember, air power could make all the difference. And so far, we haven't seen very much of it outside Kyiv. The only thing that Kyiv has seen is incoming cruise missiles, rockets, and shells. Could this make all the difference? Could this military convoy that we hear is trying to encircle Kyiv from 3 directions turn the tables on the capital city of Ukraine and bring this invasion very rapidly to a halt? That's the big question facing the people of Ukraine.